Hello, all of you truth-seeking, free-thinking, freedom-loving patriots out there. Welcome back to the Canada Truth channel, where Canada, the illusion of freedom and system of control is exposed. Today, I'm remaking a video from a previous channel, a review of PSYOP operations in the 21st century, a strategy research project from the Department of Navy in the US. Now, this is not brand new news, but it did cause a lot of horror and outrage from the people in Canada. A couple of different stories with, interestingly enough, exactly the same headlines. Anyway, this disturbed a lot of people, and so it should. However, it's not new at all. They're just announcing it. Because somehow, in their twisted sense of fairness, they have to tell us what they're doing. And they do it in a bunch of different ways, but this is pretty in your face. However, it's not new. And for anyone that doesn't believe that the government would actually use propaganda and other techniques to influence Canadian, they're sorely mistaken and need only look at World War II propaganda posters to see evidence of that. These are not even some of the more horrific propaganda posters or films that were created during World War II. Now, many people will say, well, this was propaganda to unite Canadians, to join the fight. Well, that's true. It is considered white propaganda. However, it is propaganda, and it is evidence that they've been using it for a long, long time. So it's not new at all. And they're saying they want to establish a new organization as a weapon to influence Canadians. And like I've said many, many times before, in order to defend yourself from a weapon that's being used against you, you have to have thorough knowledge and understanding of that weapon to be able to defend yourself against it. And if you don't have knowledge and understanding, you have no chance in defeating it. One need look back again to World War II and Japan. Japan didn't have the same level of knowledge and understanding of atomic weapons as the United States. Japan was defenseless against atomic weapons. Japan had no chance of defeating the United States because they didn't have the same knowledge and understanding of atomic weapons. So I like to read a lot of different information, especially about weapons that are being used against me. And I also like to share what I've discovered with all of you. That being said, PSYOP operations in the 21st century, Gary L. Whitley, Department of the Navy, approved for public release. Now, I've chosen this particular document for two reasons. I think it's an excellent and easy to understand document. And secondly, it is approved for public release, so I'm not going to get in any trouble for sharing any type of classified information or anything like that. Now, as always, whenever I read any document, first thing I do is look for an application section, a definition section, or a glossary. Read all of the definitions listed so I understand the context in which they are used. Black propaganda. Propaganda that purports to emanate from a source other than the true one. Gray propaganda. Propaganda that does not specifically identify any source. Propaganda. Any form of communication in support of national objectives designed to influence the opinions, emotion, attitudes, or behavior of any group in order to benefit the sponsor either directly or indirectly. Gee, that sounds nefarious already, doesn't it? Psychological operations. Planned operations to convey selected information and indicators to foreign audiences to influence their emotions, motives, objective reasoning, and ultimately the behavior of foreign governments, organizations, groups, and individuals. The purpose of psychological operations is to induce or reinforce foreign attitudes and behavior favorable to the originator's objectives. Boy, that sounds sinister, doesn't it? Psychological warfare. The planned use of propaganda and other psychological actions having the primary purpose of influencing the opinions, emotions, attitudes, and behavior of hostile foreign groups in such a way to support the achievement of national objectives. White propaganda. Propaganda disseminated and acknowledged by the sponsor or by an accredited agency thereof. So look at psychological warfare definition and then jump back and look at this news, and it's pretty clear that we are considered the enemy, and therefore it's worthy to use propaganda and other techniques to influence us, to benefit their national and globalist interests. Okay, I'll try to keep the ranting to a minimum, but all of this stuff just makes me crazy. All right, so this was back in 2000. A revolution in psychological operations, PSYOP, will occur in the near future. The internet will be the vehicle to enable a revolution in PSYOP and improve the capabilities of PSYOP to achieve objectives specified in the National Security Strategy, NSS. I would also say the globalist security strategy. Reflex control was presented as a method of PSYOP for the future. I will redo a separate video on reflexive control and what the Canadians' strategy research paper has to say about it. PSYOP has been an essential element of warfare since ancient times, and that's absolutely true. They've been using it for a long, long time, and they've been studying us and improving their methods for a long, long time. Here are a couple of quotes. I very much like both of these quotes. One need not destroy one's enemy. One need only destroy his willingness to engage. And one of their tactics is propaganda and PSYOPs. Killing the enemy's courage is as vital as killing his troops. Karl von Clausewitz. And this is from Vom Krieg, or On War. Definition and description of PSYOPs. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a big believer in if you cannot define a problem, you have no chance in solving that problem. So I'm all about definitions. PSYOPs have been employed for thousands of years. Since PSYOP have been conducted over an expansive period of time and across the spectrum of crisis and threats, it's essential that a definition be identified. We all have our common understanding of what PSYOPs is, but this is really getting into it, and I find it fascinating and valuable information. Psychological operations are operations planned to convey selected information and indicators to foreign audiences to influence their emotions, motive, objective, reasoning, and ultimately the behavior, of foreign governments, organizations, groups, and individuals. It's also important to understand where PSYOP resides in our joint doctrine. PSYOP is a subset of information operations. Joint Publication 313 defines I.O. as actions taken to affect an adversary's information and information systems while defending one's own information and information systems. Now, if that doesn't sound exactly like what the Trudeau government is doing in Canada right now, I don't know what is. Offensive I.O. is the integrated use of assigned and supporting capabilities and activities mutually supported by intelligence to affect the adversary decision makers to achieve or promote specific objectives. Once again, if we look back, that's exactly what they're telling us they want to do. Like, it's just astonishing. Offensive I.O. is conducted at all levels of war, and therefore PSYOP are as well employed at each level. Additionally, Joint Publication 353 defines the categories of military PSYOP as strategic, operational, tactical, and consolidated. These categories are defined in Table 1 above. Strategic, operational, tactical, consolidated. So here the above figure illustrates type of PSYOP that can be conducted. The figure was obtained from a publication published in 1951. As you can see, the term for PSYOP during this period of time was propaganda. So this works, you can use propaganda or PSYOP. So there's white PSYOPs, gray PSYOPs, and black PSYOPs. White propaganda, gray propaganda, and black propaganda. And we've already learned the definitions of each. White propaganda, we know basically it's propaganda put out by the government. Those World War II posters, for example. Gray propaganda, we don't know the source of this propaganda. And black propaganda is what I like to call the mainstream media. People believe it's the mainstream media reporting the news, but the messages that they're reporting come from hidden sources. It's also important to note that the utmost care must be taken in planning black or gray PSYOP Severe damage can occur to credibility of public affairs, or PA, and media channel if care is not taken in conducting black or gray PSYOP. Accordingly, white PSYOP should remain as such and does not cross into gray or black PSYOP. Now, if you don't find that statement hilarious and absolutely relevant to what the mainstream media has done to itself through their black propaganda, they've destroyed their credibility. And in this paper, it warns you must take utmost care not to get caught in a black or gray PSYOP because it will destroy your credibility. Actions essential to a successful PSYOP are clearly defined mission, analysis of all targets, actions that are evaluated for psychological implications, a reliable medium or media for transmission, rapid exploitation of PSYOP themes, and continual evaluation of the results of PSYOP for relevance to the mission and goals. Now, apply these essential actions described in a PSYOP to current events in the world. CV19. Apply these essential actions and think about CV19. There are 4 general points to consider with regards to PSYOP: origination, transmission, reception, and evaluation. See, evaluation, they're always studying us and always studying how to better control us. PSYOP techniques are used to plan and execute truth projection activities intended to inform foreign groups and populations persuasively. Planned military PSYOP may affect not only military targets, but also political, economic, or social structures within the target area. All of this sounds pretty sinister, doesn't it? PSYOP wrap-up. PSYOP are used to convey selected information and indicators to foreign audiences to influence their emotions, objective reasoning, and motives. In order to accomplish this goal, PSYOP must be directed at a clearly defined goal or objective. The ability to analyze, evaluate targets and their effects, a reliable media transmission, and a rapid ability to implement PSYOP. PSYOP depends on communication to ensure proper execution of the mission and objectives. Command and control, pre-planning, and support from all levels ensure this. PSYOP and the national security strategy, and I would argue PSYOP and the globalist strategy. The above propaganda provided a descriptive, the above paragraphs provided a descriptive and definition of PSYOP. From this information, one can see that PSYOP is a ways to achieve our objectives as identified in the globalist security strategy. PSYOP are a vital part of the broad range of global political, military, economic, and informational activities to achieve the ends of the globalist security strategy. PSYOP can be employed to achieve the identified ends to control the thinking and behavior of the group or individual. The need to integrate PSYOP with all national elements of power has been a precept for decades. And here we go. They touch on World War II. Propaganda is not used for the sake of propaganda. It is used in conjunction with a military, diplomatic, or economic objective, which must now include informational objective. It obtains its best results in neutral countries or before the actual outbreak of war or in stirring up disunity in non-belligerent nations. Reflex control. In this paper and the Canadian paper that we're going to review in another video, they say this is Russian reflexive control. I would argue that if the Russians are using this because it's effective, it's because they've adopted it from the globalists who probably invented it, because they've been studying us long before the Russians. Reflex control and human network attacks. The primary goal of PSYOP is to control the thinking and behavior of the target audience. To accomplish this, you must act to manipulate the information the target audience receives. Sound familiar? For an individual, the data processor is the brain. This is a vulnerable target since the brain has no firewall or virus protection to protect it either from deceptive or electromagnetic processes. That sounds also quite sinister. These targets are vulnerable to human network HNA attacks. And like I said, they say Russia, but I believe the globalists probably came up with it and the Russians adopted it. Reflexive control is a type of human network attack. The target of an HNA is the enemy's decision-making processes, both human, the mind's soft data processor, and material, hardware data processing. Technological developments make it possible to subject all the people, from ordinary citizens to strategic leaders, heads of state, or military leaders, to a complex PSYOP offensive. A further description of reflexive control is important here. Reflexive control involves creating a pattern or providing partial information that causes an enemy to react in a predetermined fashion without realizing that he's been manipulated. Its aim, above all else, is to influence command and control systems and decision makers. The same type equipment used in typical PSYOP will support reflexive control operations. In these operations, the information or facts can now be fabricated in a much more realistic form in real time on radio or TV, using high-tech voice, image recording, editing equipment. Perhaps even more important, the means of psychological warfare are now more diversified, and its striking force has increased. They flood us with information, misinformation, disinformation, and leave us not knowing what to believe or what is true. However, it's important to note that to conduct reflexive control operations, we must employ black as well as gray PSYOP. Therefore, these operations should be conducted with care to avoid loss of credibility with communication methods essential for conducting white PSYOP. And if you think of Event 201, a lot of that involved controlling the narrative, controlling the information. So they were planning a reflexive control operation. It's unbelievable. But once you're armed with complete information, It's the there's no turning off the lights. Timothy L. Thomas article titled Human Network Attacks. Today, simulation, stealth, and various types of camouflage technologies allow for the mixing of spurious with the genuine and can cause errors in the enemy's decision making. Just what I just said. They just bombard us with information, misinformation, and disinformation. On the effectiveness of reflexive control operations, he states, reflexive control operations as an information weapon is more important than firepower in achieving objectives. Reflexive control is also listed as a method for achieving geopolitical superiority and as a mechanism to control negotiations. In this regard, reflex control would be used to influence a state's information element of power and thereby its decision-making process by formulating certain information or misinformation. And there's 11 types of mechanisms they identify: distraction, overload, paralysis, exhaustion, deception, divisive technique, pacification, deterrence, provocation, suggestion, and pressure. I'll leave it up to y'all to do your own research, read this document for yourself. But if you just have a quick overview, doesn't that all sound familiar? Definition of communication. Communication includes the numerous processes by which one person influences another. This includes many human actions. That includes speech, written material, music, drama, internet websites, political arts, and other forms of behavior. To understand communications, you must understand people. And as I've said many, many times before, these diabolical villains have been studying us for centuries. The ability to understand how people relate to each other is crucial. Excuse me. Individuals living in society generally desire to adhere to the opinions, attitudes, and habits of those whom they are motivated to interact. They form a culture. The culture influences individuals as well as influences each other's perceptions, and the individual's way of seeing reality is based on the actual world around him. All social groups have a culture and require a degree of conformity. The group culture provides definitive methods and procedures to ensure conformity to group norm and values. Communication, the originator, the receiver. To inform, to understand, to instruct or teach, to learn, to entertain, to enjoy, to persuade, to dispose or decide. It's important that PSYOP warriors understand that communication content of the PSYOP messages can be designed to perform all of the functions stated above, any one of the four, or any mix. The communication process. For maximum effect, propaganda demands a specific rather than a generic theme. Some trust of our motives on the part of the audience. Timing such that the propaganda campaign can immediately precede the actions it is intended to affect. First-class intelligence in 3 phases: social and cultural attributes of the people concerned, extent to which the people listen or read our propaganda, the extent to which it affects their actions, and accessibility. Example, the audience must be able to hear our broadcasts or read our pamphlets. And I might add, over and over and over and over, hear their broadcasts and read their pamphlets. Like I noticed before, the headlines are exactly the same. Same message over and over. And you can watch it on mainstream news. There's a lot of videos out there that shows all of the networks saying exactly the same thing because it's a script. The importance of understanding interpersonal relationships as an essential part of communication process and the need for a clear vision of social pressures as part of total communication process needs to be emphasized. And they're using social pressure more and more and more as a weapon. People are getting doxxed. Their lives are getting destroyed like it's crazy now. So there you can see not only the government, but Antifa, other groups are using PSYOPs and propaganda. The communication climate is one of the social factors that affect persuasive communication. That is, what people say and how they react to a PSYOP message depends on where they are, who is listening, and what communication channels are being used. Influence of the group. The focus of this section is on the primary groups to which an individual belongs. 4 variables in the communication process to consider in influencing groups. Exposure to the media. Strengths and weaknesses of different types of media. Existing attitude or attitudes of the individuals. The content of the message and the response of the individual to communication. The influence of the group on communication is extremely important to PSYOP. Of course, and they're, like I said, they're using it more and more and more and more. Pressure, 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 pressure. And the 11 elements that were listed in the chart previously, pressure was the final one. In other words, interpersonal relationships must be considered to properly understand the communication process and to conduct effective PSYOP. Talks about PSYOP and the internet. PSYOP has been an essential element of warfare since ancient times. PSYOP will continue to be a key strategic weapon to provide the ways to accomplish the objective specified in the globalist security strategy. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Announcing it right in our faces. They're going to use propaganda and other techniques to influence Canadians. Seeing what we've just learned, is that not PSYOP operations? I think the very definition tells us, yes, it is. There's a lot of information out there on the subject. As always, I encourage everyone to do their own research and develop their own level of knowledge and understanding, and then pay it forward. But you can see there's a whole lot of information out there regarding PSYOPs. It's very interesting, and because, as I said in the introduction of this video, it's very important to understand the weapons being used against us if we have any chance in defending ourselves or defeating them. Reflexive control goes deeper into the subject, And once again, it is the Canadians' opinion and a Canadian research project. And we'll review it in video coming up. So if you like the content, please share it and subscribe. Talk to you later.